So we're all aware of the hierarchy in pop music, right? And I don't mean in terms of the quality of the music, although that is a factor. I mean in terms of the respect and influence an artist has. You know, right now at the top you have your Lil Nas X's and your Meg Thee Stallions, but in 2013 it was an entirely different story. Things were a lot more moody. Artists like Lana Del Rey and Lorde popularized the sad white girl sound that was ever present at the time, but it took a couple years for the sound to truly become mainstream, and one of the most prominent artists to ride this wave to success was Halsey, and I've never understood the hype. I mean, her production is pretty middle of the road. It's not like she has the best collaborators, and her voice sounds like if an AI was programmed to be a quote good singer. I just didn't get it. And I especially don't understand where Halsey sits on this hierarchy, because she doesn't really demand attention like a Lady Gaga or an Ariana Grande, but she isn't exactly ignorable either. And it really seems like I should have a feeling about her one way or the other, and I've been looking for an excuse to have an opinion on her, and in August of last year, she gave me one. Halsey released her 4th studio album, If I Can't Have Love, I Want Power, produced by... That's interesting. You know, it's the thing that first piqued my interest when this record was getting teased, because it makes no goddamn sense. A pop artist working with producers who, historically speaking, have had no interest in making pop music, but I guess I'm getting ahead of myself. This record has been in my sights for a while, mostly because I've seen virtually nobody talk about it since its release. Not the pretentious music crowd, not the pop music scene, not even the Twitter stans. It's like it never even existed, and you know, it'd be one thing if the album was bad, but it's not. It's pretty good, and at least critically speaking, most people agreed. It's what makes me feel insane when I talk about this record, so with that being said, allow me to sound insane for the next however many minutes. Skimming through her discography, you can tell that Halsey is a big fan of music, and some of you are probably watching this thinking to yourselves, well, no fucking shit, but what I mean by that is that she's passionate about it. Even though many of her ideas don't end up panning out in my opinion, it's clear that she creates for the sake of art rather than the sake of profit, so the fact that Halsey recruited the Nine Inch Nail guys is a statement itself. Now, I try not to do this too often because most of the time no real useful information can be gained from doing this, but I committed the cardinal sin of analysis and try to get some insight on the album straight from its source. This record is supposed to be big. Halsey wanted it to sound cinematic, so getting Reznor and Ross, who at this point are pretty much your go-to for scoring your prestige art film, makes sense. On paper. Again, these two make industrial rock, and their film scores are pretty sparse instrumentally, which completely goes against the watered-down pop Halsey built herself on, so some compromises are going to have to be made. Which is to say that this is about as high-risk, high-reward as it could possibly get. Again, the record is supposed to sound big, but does it? I guess I should probably mention that this album was released in accompaniment with a short film of the same name, and if you want to hear my opinion on it, I mean, it definitely looks expensive. It suffers from a lot of the same problems that most supplementary material for albums do, the main one being that it can't really stand on its own as a quote short film, because functionally it's just a series of music videos with an incredibly loose plot stitching it all together. Like, you would really have to meet it more than halfway if you wanted to derive any real meaning out of the film alone. I don't want to harp on this for too much longer, I just felt like it was at least worth mentioning because it's not every day that you get an hour of movie as an appetizer for an album. And for an album that's this consumed with its visuals, there kind of needs to be a reason for this to be warranted. There needs to be some sort of sweeping statement for the audience to sink their teeth into, otherwise they'll leave the experience asking, so what was the point of that? And I want to clarify, it's okay to make dumb music that doesn't mean anything, but not when you present it to your audience like it's something so much greater than that. I mentioned a second ago how it's difficult to pull any meaningful, meaning out of the film, and if I really wanted to be a dick, I can kind of say the same about the album too. Halsey describes If I Can't Have Love as a concept album about the quote joys and horrors of pregnancy and childbirth. Alright, so I'm gonna level with you guys, and I know this may surprise some of you, but I don't have a uterus, so feel free to ignore any amount of what I'm about to say because I know I'm not really the target audience for this record, but I kind of feel like it's just a little bit full of itself. I like the idea. I like the idea of exploring the concept of pregnancy and all of the kind of fucked up social, political, and physical implications that come with it. It's a topic that I rarely see discussed, especially not in music, and especially not with this interesting body horror angle, so you know, points for being unique. But when I see these themes of self-destruction and loss and self-autonomy and the lack thereof, I can't help but ask myself, why? I like the what. The what is interesting, but there needs to be a why. Why are we being introduced to these concepts? What point is trying to be made? You can't build the record up as some divisive think piece when the big fucking mic drop of the project is, hey, what do you think of this? I always feel like my thoughts come across more negative than what they actually are in these videos, and that's definitely the case here. If I Can't Have Love 100% has has some issues thematically, but as music, most of what this record has to offer is pretty good, great even. When I listen to Halsey's back catalog, I find it really difficult to latch onto any of it. I already touched on how the production in her early work is like the music equivalent to pouring a glass of water into a bigger glass of water, but lyrically it's not great either. Like, getting high on legal marijuana? Oh my god. Like, come on. Let's not try to push the envelope too much, Ashley. Jesus fucking Christ. Anyway, fast forward to this album, and Halsey has really come into her own as a songwriter. She's pretty good at building the atmosphere that surrounds these tracks, and even if I think that the concept of the album as a whole could use some work, she's able to paint some vivid pictures through her lyrics, and this is complemented very well with Reznor and Ross's production. The first track where this pairing truly started to make sense to me was the second, titled Bells in Santa Fe, which is a masterclass in terms of building tension. It gets more and more intense until it smash cuts into track 3, Easier Than Lying, which explodes into a super animated pop-punk anthem. It most reminds me of something that would be on a record like Danger Days. But if you haven't heard the record and you're just listening to me describe it, it probably sounds like the album is kind of all over the place, and it is, but it's very much a clusterfuck by design. Stylistically, If I Can't Have Love pulls influence from all over the late 90s and early 2000s, and the majority of it works for me. The album is definitely at its best when it's trying new things, and the tracks that play it safer don't do as much for me. I Am Not a Woman, I'm a God, and Lilith, very subtle by the way, are a couple examples of songs that, in my opinion, are either too bubblegummy or too stripped back instrumentally, the former of which comes way too close to reminding me of her G-Eazy era, and I'm honestly not sure if she can pull off the latter. Her squeaky clean voice doesn't really lend itself well to the format. I don't know, maybe I'm being too mean. I like the album, and for the most part so did everyone else, so why did it completely disappear from the public consciousness so soon after its release? I can think of a couple reasons why. There weren't exactly a lot of people begging for a Halsey concept album, or a Halsey album, and to many, the Nine Inch Nails partnership was really confusing and it probably drove some people away. But there is one big reason that kind of towers over all of the others, and if anyone could be blamed for this record's sudden drop off the face of the planet, I'd personally point fingers at America's cutest little lesbian and his bipolar uncle. If I Can't Have Love, I Want Power had about 2 days in the spotlight before Kanye surprise dropped Donda, and then less than a week after that, Drake surprise dropped Certified Lover Boy as a power play, I guess. You can really call this a power play. Regardless, nobody would shut the fuck up about these two for the next several months, and that was more than enough time for Halsey as well as her new record to fall to the wayside. I guess the world was too busy talking about the funny pregnant emojis that they forgot about the actual real-life pregnant human being. Typical. Am I right, ladies? Shut the fuck up. Now this guy gets it. But yeah, I do kind of think this album deserves a second chance. I mean, it's not gonna get it, and in terms of Halsey's future as an artist, that kinda makes me worried. I really hope she doesn't learn the wrong lesson and take the record underperforming as a sign that she should try to fit back into the Halsey-shaped hole that the industry has cut out for her. After all, the last thing any artist's career needs is a relapse. Alright, so the next video is going to be about The Creature, and if you don't know what that is, I don't either. He's in my walls right now though, please